All right, everyone. Welcome back to our Mad Labs Miro adventure. We're here again with Rachel. Hey, Rachel.
Hi, excited to be here today.
So we're gonna be talking about perhaps one of the most common and popular methods, which is concept mapping. But if I'm gonna talk a big game about how it's so popular, you probably have to tell everybody what it actually is.
Absolutely. So concept mapping is a great tool to use to get a bird's eye view of a problem or project that you're working on. Trying to unpack it, it's pretty self-explanatory with the name, but it's really trying to map what is the set of factors, what's important, what sits around a concept, with the goal of being able to explore it a little bit with a little bit more depth, a little bit more nuance, and understand where does it intersect with other aspects.
Okay, interesting. Well, I have to confess that as an old, I used to do this with physical paper on a wall. And in its own right, these digital tools for concept mapping have probably been one of the biggest time savers I've had, right? The ability to edit, move, shift without having to rewrite or embarrass myself with really poor sketches.
100%. I feel like so many people would do it on a piece of flip chart paper and then say, let me take a picture of that. The picture never got revisited. So I think using digital tools allows us to interact with concept maps more frequently and update them because shockingly, the world evolves and changes and new influences come in.
Really well said. The other thing I noticed as well is it's really nice to be able to group sets of Post-its, rapidly create them, but also search them as well. So if you had a brilliant moment just the other day about the relationship of a dynamic with a college, maybe it was a professor or admissions, and now as you pointed out, that evolves because we're in part-time and hybrid programs. If I added something but can't remember where I put that Post-it, or in our case, the old piece of paper that was hiding somewhere in a closet somewhere, this is a fast track right to that, right?
Yeah, I've seen it be really powerfully used in research domains where folks are trying to understand where they start with a big research question and are trying to, looking across literature, being able to unpack it. The same is true in the design space when you're entering into a really messy problem space like climate change mitigation or food access. There's just so much there that being able to search and understand what's that set of factors that's influencing, I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, well, I think you really hit the nail on the head by saying, for tactical UI problems, sometimes having a really exhaustive concept map may be a little bit of overdoing it. However, when we think in strategic design, which is systems of problems, housing, hunger, insecurity, big challenges around mobility or transportation, it's not quite as simple as just one thing like a car or a motorcycle in the middle.
Right. Problems we're solving today, I think, really are the intersection of many different disciplines. And so if you're tying a tight box or drawing a tight box around a specific concept, then you're probably not going to make a ton of traction on a big problem that matters at a given time.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's go ahead and shift over to our template because unlike some of our other patterns, I think the instructions for this one are going to become more apparent in our example. So what we've done here, thanks to your credit, Rachel, is we've created a kind of end-to-end-ish concept mapping, and there's a variety of dimensions to this. So I see one green or differently colored Post-it note compared to all the other Post-it notes. I see a bunch of sort of spaghetti lines happening in different places and words sort of overlaying on those lines. So would you mind just kind of walking us first through what is the emphasis on this particularly colored green college Post-it note, and then what's its relationship with everything else?
Sure. So the green Post-it note, that's the starting place. That's that juicy place that you care about, whatever that compelling first concept is. I think people always ask the question of where do I start?
Okay.
There's nothing amazing necessarily about us starting with college, but it's the place that we had intuition about, we had energy about. And I think the hardest part of concept mapping is just starting. So put that green Post-it note down, and then you can unpack without judgment, which is really hard to do. What are the different factors that come into your head and that can connect to that central starting point?
Okay, excellent. So if I wasn't using college in this example, I could put things like automobile or house or kitchen or rocket ship or really anything to your point, which at least anchors me against some sort of piece.
Absolutely. I think the most important part is starting someplace versus saying, I don't know where we're going to start and then having a debate with your team. That's a great design behavior to adopt, is to stop talking about it and just put something down, I think.
Start making, as we say.
Yeah, and so the goal of the concept map is to see what different places emerge anyways. So that starting point is kind of arbitrary, but if you need a rule of thumb, it's a place where you have energy or you care about, or the place that you think, hey, there's something there to unpack.
Really well said, Rachel. Thanks for that. Okay, so we have college in here. Now I see a bunch of other yellow post-it notes in our example, right? I see technology, people, curriculum, valuable skills, all kind of interconnected in this first ring around college. Did I build all those post-it notes in some sort of a parking lot and drag them over? Did I just start putting them on and then link? Why and how did I generate all these?
Yeah, the way I like to do it, which everyone does these slightly differently, is to first do a bit of a diverge around what are all of the things that could connect to college.
Okay.
So I start trying to just put down what are a couple of those post-it notes as a starting point, then I think that first diverge step can help just to get those initial set of factors out of my brain. And also oftentimes I get to more nuance after I've gotten the couple obvious ones pushed out.
Okay, and should I think through your perspective when I'm doing this? Should I think through my perspective? So for me, if I think college, Taco Bell should be on here somewhere along my journey. And I don't see that in your original piece here as the highbrow version of professors and students and books and computers and the like. How do I think about the point of view of when I'm generating these ideas?
Yeah, I certainly think it has to be informed by the people that you're designing for. Systems don't have problems. Organizations don't have problems, people have problems.
Sure.
And so you have to root into what are the people's experiences and how do they play out. At the same time, we're all subjective. All of us who had college experience, yours would have Taco Bell, football would probably be on mine someplace.
Fair enough.
And it's a place where not ignoring that because it's going to influence how this shakes out anyways.
Now, is this one of those patterns we've talked in other videos about wanting to diverge and actually work independently and them come together? Or are you and I brainstorming all of, in this case, these yellow post-it notes together?
I think it could go either way. I think it's always a helpful behavior to just set a quick timer and say, hey, Adam, let's just both take 2 minutes to generate our initial set of factors, then we'll come together. These tools, I think, are only as useful as you're learning from them. So for me, the value is both what we're producing, but also the conversation that we're having while we're producing it. Because we can debate, after we have that initial set of factors, the richness from this comes from us choosing where and how we place it and what it interconnects with.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I can see some of that. Now, is what we're trying to represent in this concept map, like the closer to the green post-it note, does that mean the stronger the association, the more important the issue, the more intuitive or linear the thinking was to kind of get to that place? Or could it be any of those things?
I think it could be any of those things because it's subjective in how you put it together.
Well said.
We could rearrange this into a radically different way. I think that the value here, though, is how we've labeled the lines.
Oh, interesting.
Oftentimes when people do concept mapping, they just draw a line.
Okay.
And there's typically a lot embedded in what that line represents.
Okay.
I like to think about what's being exchanged between two different factors, or what is that relationship? How do you add more nuance to it? Because there could be power relationships, financial relationships, there could be dependencies that play out. And I think that's the place where not putting any sort of label on there, it's like, oh, they're connected. Great, but how are they connected?
I guess everything is all connected, right? If we abstract large enough, right, we all have some relationship. But I really love that point of view. And in fact, as you can see in your diagram that you've provided as an example, we have the opportunity to come in and say, oh, I see, college includes technology, people, and curriculum, but it provides valuable life skills. Now, interestingly enough, how do we think about choosing the includes versus provides versus leverages versus teach? And I also noticed that there's a little bit of an action-oriented bent to some of these associations. Is that universally the case?
I think that it's done differently depending on the context, but I'd say for me, the important thing is that this represents or should be backed by a set of stories in a specific context, because college could play out balancing technology and valuable life skills for certain demographic of students or a certain set of institutions, but it could look different. I think it's a good balance to say to ask ourselves, is this universally true, or is this true about the set of colleges that we're working with to kind of give us that place? The other thing you asked about the action-oriented verbs. I think it shows those relationships between the different entities, certainly. And it's a place where I think it moves us away, because oftentimes I'll have asked students, especially doing a lot of work with government, to make a concept map, and it ends up looking like an org chart, where it's a set of hierarchies that play out and say, one cascades to, exactly. One cascades to 2, cascades to 3. And this shows that it's actually about relationships and the way that these different concepts intersect and influence each other.
Oh, see, interesting. Okay, well, let's move out of your example here that you provided us and into some of these concept maps. Now, I will tell you that it's interesting, unlike a lot of our templates, this is relatively sparse. So we have these green topics in the middle, which is we talked about could be college or housing or mobility, and then we see the rest blank. Now, one of the themes that we're gonna hear in a lot of our templates is, instead of saying concept map 1, I could label that as Adam, and you could label concept map 2 as Rachel. Yep. We could also say, hey, this was what we thought in January versus what we thought in June. Have you seen any other types of organizational habits come together? Is it time-lapse more popular? Is it by contributor?
I'd say that the other one that came to mind, which I saw my students do when they were unpacking concept maps around the food systems, was showing really different dimensions of it and showing those different concept maps. Mm-hmm. So one team, which would be, concept map 3 was focused on the supply chain issues. One team was focused on production issues. One team was focused, and the goal was to build out those separate concept maps and then have conversations about what's overlapping between them, or what are the places where we're seeing these are fundamentally disconnected, but concept map 1 needs to connect to concept map 3 and inherently does. So I think teams can approach it in different ways. The goal is, again, learning from these things. Like if it's helpful to see, hey, here's how our thinking has evolved over time, a linear time scale makes sense. These are snapshots of where your team's brain was at any given moment, or showing how different team members have perspectives on it, saying, hey, this is how Adam views the world, this is how Rachel views the world. That's also helpful, I think, to guide some synthesis and understand where differences lie.
I love your point about how seeing the different systems can interact together. I was reminded of an example where we did a mobility-focused session, and it all came down to employment. And so half the room took the employer's point of view, and then the other half took the employee's point of view. And then we had a third one, which is around parents or caregivers in this journey. And just to your credit, it was amazing that sort of the employee and employer Venn diagram was closer to a circle than it was a set of extrapolated points. But actually the parent and the employee was actually quite different depending on age of children and primary form of motivation and how far you were or how big your commute was.
Absolutely. And I think, with all of these videos, we're trying to also think through what are concrete actions you can take from them. So in that example, a great thing that can help to inform, if you say you were then having a stakeholder meeting with employers, employees, and parents, then you understand, hey, this is what perspectives they're coming in with. That's what can drive conflict across stakeholder meetings. And if you're not understanding those different points of view, then you can't find the similarities and try to build forward. So I think that exploration across different stakeholder groups can be super helpful.
Yeah, what a powerful tool for alignment. And not only that, but organization as well, and focus on the right things or the overlapping things with the right audience in the room at the time, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's a thing that people don't do enough with concept maps is take them externally. The best thing I've seen done with concept maps is to take them to stakeholders in a project and say, here's how I see this, what's missing from it? And with digital tools, of course, you can share it with them very easily and say, hey, please add in, please iterate, please evolve it. That's the place where we start to get protective when we've only probably spent an hour, a couple of hours building out these concept maps. It's a way more powerful mechanism to get people to please infringe, please change, please edit this, because it gives us a more holistic understanding of a space as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I love the invitation to be open enough and confident enough to take that challenge and that provoke and really go. The last, kind of power tip, through this same lens that you're using through digital collaboration is I also encourage people to add images and photos to post it as well. It's really hard to understand what a professor is if you in your own mind haven't shared if that professor is maybe old or young or big or small or focused or narrow or tenured or not tenured and the like. And so reminder to everybody that the power of bringing the entire internet to this digital whiteboard is that you can represent more precisely what you mean, whereas sometimes abstracted words carry lots of subjective meanings.
Absolutely. I think it's a place where there's pros and cons to both doing things on paper and digitally. Sure. With paper, oftentimes we're more ready to throw things out, just write them quickly and then pitch them. But I think the power of being in a digital tool is that you can bring in those different resources, or you can even just say, hey, let's just quick do an image search to make sure we have alignment on this front, because oftentimes, of course, people see things differently. So we could be talking about the same thing, but not actually have an idea that it's different in both.
Well said. Yeah, it's funny. Pizza is one of those universal topics. Everyone has a different view. Pineapple, no pineapple, issue still remains unsolved. 100%. So last question for you, and I want to wrap up. How long should I invest? Should I take? Should I budget? Should I expect from people? Is this a 2-minute breakout and then come together? Is this a 20-minute small group thing before we bring it to the masses? Any guidance there about where to start, or is it choose your own adventure each time?
I think it comes back to intention of what is your team trying to get from it. So say you're trying to just kickstart a meeting, get some initial concepts in the board and understand what's people's viewpoint, then sure, set a timer, say everyone do a 2-minute brainstorm, let's engage in this for 20 minutes and then unpack it a little bit and reflect. If you are instead, say you're an organization that has been funded to really drive a new outcome, drive change on homelessness or something,
sure,
then this should be a multi-week process where you are engaging with people, asking for their feedback, seeing what's missing, and using it to determine your strategy. So I'd say it can grow or shrink based on need, but it forces the team to have a conversation about what are we trying to get out of this, which a lot of design methods that at least people don't have that conversation enough to say, what are we really trying to learn from this and how are we using this?
Well, I think being practical and applied is always at the center of these templates. And I love what you said. It reminded me as a recovering consultant of like, hey, there's always the 1 minute, the 1 day, the 1 week, the 1 month answer, regardless of what we do. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for guiding us through this exercise. And again, feel free to watch this video again, leave comments and feedback, let us know how we can improve, and of course, share your own successes, whether you're thinking about a really important societal issue like housing or hunger, or whether you're moving into more precise consumer applications like how to microwave food or ultimately move from point A to point B. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll look forward to hearing from you soon.